In this episode of Journey with Jake, Dr. David Helfand takes us on an adventure into the heart of relationships. From the science of neuroplasticity to the power of self-care and connection, Dr. Helfand shares how couples can rediscover each other through communication, empathy, and a little bit of adventure. Whether it's a spontaneous date night or a full-on couples retreat, this conversation reminds us that the greatest journeys often begin at home. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Welcome back to Journey with Jake. I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive in, don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and connect with me on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast to stay up to date on all the incredible adventures and inspiring stories we share each week. Today's guest is Dr. David Helfand, a licensed psychologist and couples therapist who combines neuroscience, meditation, and mindfulness to help couples reconnect and grow stronger together. Through his couples retreats and workshops, Dr. Helfand helps partners rediscover adventure in their relationships, whether that's exploring new places or simply taking time to understand each other on a deeper level. We'll talk about everything from neuroplasticity and emotional regulation to the importance of communication, self-care, and shared adventure. If you've ever wondered how to keep your relationship strong and full of life, this conversation is packed with insight and encouragement. And if you enjoy this episode, you'll also love episode 117 with Marcus Higgs about strengthening parent and preteen bonds through adventure and understanding. All right, let's get to my conversation with Dr. David Helfand. All right, I'm excited today. I have Dr. David Helfand on the show with me today. David, Dr. H, whatever you go by, welcome to Journey with Jake.
Thank you, Jake. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. You got doctor in the title. I know you're a therapist. You deal a lot with couples, things like that. We're going to kind of talk about the whole adventure of marriage retreats and what's all involved with that. Before we do that, though, I want to know a little bit about you and kind of your background. Just tell me where you're from, where you grew up, that sort of thing, and then we'll kind of get into it.
Sure. Well, you could say I've been on my own adventure. I'm sure you get a lot of puns on this show, so I'll try to get them out early, Jake.
All right, perfect.
But I grew up in rural Vermont and eventually decided I wanted to go to the city and see what that was all about. I went down for grad school, met my wife. We started a family. At some point, we decided that it made sense to raise our kids in the country. So we've gone full loop back up to the Vermont area. And I started my career in neuroscience, working on neurofeedback, brain mapping to help with anxiety, panic, insomnia, and kind of related disorders. And I remember the client where it happened. I don't know if we have time for the full story, but I decided at some point that, you know what, I think I need to look at the full system of a family or marriage in order to really help people. And the short version is I found my way to doing couples therapy. My parents had been doing retreats for almost 3 decades. And as of 6 months ago, I took over their entire practice.
Wow, okay. So you fell right into that. Nice. Rural Vermont, you said you went to the city. Is that Boston? Is that New York? What do you consider? What's the city?
Well, originally I would call St. Johnsbury, where I'm working right now, a city. I think there's about 10,000 people here. I will say I'm not that much of a bumpkin. So I went to UVM for my undergrad. So I was in Burlington for a while. And then I made it down to Boston. I lived outside of Boston, never Boston proper for those that want to be picky. But I was there for about 10 years, went to the North Shore where my wife and I bought a home and then circled back to Vermont.
Very good. Okay. And 2 kids, 3 kids? How many kids do you have?
Yep. 2 kids, 5 and 9.
5 and 9. Very good. All right. So you're right in the middle of all the fun. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The most common time for divorce actually is 2 years and 7 years into marriage, We're seeing a slight uptick now in what they call gray divorce with empty nesters, but 2 and 7 is still the multimodal peaks, if you will.
Interesting. See, this is what's cool about talking to people like you. You have all these like numbers and this information that I didn't even wasn't even aware of, but 2 and 7. And you've been married yourself for what'd you say, 12 years?
11.
11. Okay. I was right there. Did you even say? I don't even know if you said. Maybe I read it somewhere. All right, 11 years.
My ring looks like about 12 years old, right?
Yeah, that's what it was. I saw the ring and that's what I figured. All right, you have a fascinating story, but you had your own challenges as a teenager. Think I read that in your bio somewhere. What was that like? What was teenage life like for you? Why was it so difficult?
A lot of reasons. I think my parents were very focused on a career. My dad also, it's a long story, but the short version is he bought an 18 farmhouse and he put himself through grad school as a carpenter. So he decided he was going to rebuild this house for the family. So he was busy a lot. I mean, I wasn't a latchkey kid in the sense of like there were no houses nearby, but I would go out in the woods for the day. I'd bring a sandwich with me, go hang out, play in the field. I made my own, what's it called? I made my own skee ball set when I was in middle school with, some
Nice.
plywood and nails and all that kind of stuff. So in many ways it was very lonely in a sense. I mean, my parents were always there, but they were always busy. I was also a pretty awkward kid. Sometimes I joke with my wife that my game is so much better since I've been married. I wish I was this good when I was single, but like my confidence, my ability just to speak to people, like it's totally different now that I'm comfortable and I have someone that cares about me and all these things. Plus it's amazing what you get from your kids. Kids
Yeah.
self-esteem, it like blows my mind. They don't care about their gut, they don't care about the food coming out of their mouth, the booger hanging out, like they're just
Yeah.
living, man. It's crazy.
It is amazing. Yeah. What kids, yeah, they just have that no fear, confidence, the whole bit. Would
Yeah.
you would you describe yourself as kind of then like an awkward teenager? Is that a good way to describe you?
I was a very insecure
Insecure.
teenager. I did farm chores. I always played sports. I don't think I was like a muscular jock, but I was in good shape. But I could definitely be socially awkward. I say in my bio, I think that I leaned towards substances when I was a younger kid, and that was my way to cope and relate to people. Obviously, playing sports is a nice way to like meet people, but I kind of remember like inviting people to a birthday party or inviting people out and people everyone would say yeah well maybe or we'll see you there and there wasn't a lot of follow through, so it definitely lonely. On one side of the spectrum I definitely had some insomnia and I had to learn self hypnosis and meditation in order to just help with sleep. On the other side of the spectrum I was definitely anxious and depressed when I was younger, and some of those stories are a little more deep and personal than perhaps for your
Sure.
audience today. But, definitely a struggle trying to figure out who I am. I was a philosophy minor when I was in college, and I think trying to answer those questions like, what is purpose? I actually took a class called What is the Meaning of Life, taught by an old rabbi. Great class, great guy. It was really interesting.
It's awesome. Speaking of the whole insomnia thing and you kind of, hypnosis and meditation. Meditation's something that's kind of peaked for me just recently. I mean, I feel like, and you hear a lot of people talking about it. Maybe when I was younger, no one really talked about it. How did you find meditation and what has meditation done for you?
A lot. So I did a yoga teacher training when I was between undergraduate and graduate school. And then my first incorporated business was a yoga business that I basically supported myself through grad school teaching yoga classes. My first business technically was repairing computers and reselling them. That was in high school. So, I mean, another person you might want to consider bringing onto your show if you haven't already, which I don't think I saw his name on your roster anywhere, is Dr. Jeff Tarrant in Oregon.
Yeah, I don't recognize that
He's
name.
the founder of the Neuromeditation Institute. Fantastic guy, really interesting research, really nice guy, big heart, great mind. I think very highly of him. And so let me rewind the answer a little bit here. When I was younger, I think as a lot of people do, you kind of battle with your mind. You feel like you are a certain way, you have intrusive thoughts, images, things that, you'd rather not deal with and cut out. At some point, maybe you find alcohol does a pretty good job of that, but it's not the answer really. And meditation, my dad was a clinical hypnotherapist for a long time. And so he introduced me to a couple books. And I remember reading this book on hypnosis and meditation. And then all of a sudden, and it had exercises in it. And then all of a sudden, I remember waking up an hour later and I was like, whoa, there's something to this.
Interesting.
And so I kind of taught myself a self hypnotic script for sleep. And I still remember it. I would lay in bed and I would picture myself laying by a stream, and all of the thoughts that came into my head were like fish swimming around a bowl in my head. And I could take them out, put them in the stream, and they would just swim away. And that's how I kind of let the thoughts go and was able to get myself into sleep. As I've gone past just insomnia, I have found that, and this is where Dr. Terrence's work comes in. He talks about how different kinds of meditation have a different impact on the brain. And I wish I had known that early on, because I think when I was younger, I just thought, well, meditation, right? But
Right.
but it doesn't really work that way. There's different kinds of meditation, different ways to apply it, and it impacts your brain differently. And so once I understood the nuance there, if I'm feeling anxious at a job interview, let's say, which has been a while since I was in a job interview, but I remember doing them. I would do diaphragmatic breathing and body-based work to calm my central nervous system, create a parasympathetic or relaxation response. Whereas if I'm feeling really down and pessimistic or just negative towards myself or the world, I'll do a loving kindness meditation to balance my frontal lobes and get a little bit more euphoria and endorphin flow, going. And there's other examples like that, but being able to tailor the meditation to what I'm actually feeling in the moment was something that came much later, but has been really helpful.
I like talking to you too because I get a chance to kind of pick your brain a little bit and maybe get some help for myself.
Please do.
So I know a big thing, you talk a lot about like neurofeedback and things like that. And I don't understand completely what that means, but I know I've heard the term like neuroplasticity and being able to kind of work this muscle of your brain, so to speak. Because I've struggled with self doubt, talking negative to myself. And so someone shared something with me about, hey, there's this thing called neuroplasticity. You can kind of change your framework, that sort of thing. Can you give me a little insight into that and how one can do that and what that means?
Sure. So neuroplasticity is a very big term. Basically just means that your brain can change. Like generally
Okay.
speaking, neuroplasticity means change. We used to think, and it was taught in schools, and I remember learning this at some point in school, that, your brain develops and then you hit a certain age and you're done. By the way, the average person brain is fully developed in men at 25, women at 19 or so. So although I like to say that, just like a good roast, it still needs to sit for a little longer and rest, but it might be fully cooked at that point. So the idea, we now know that that's bogus, that your brain continues, there is a stage of development that you do achieve, but that it continues to change over time. You can, in fact, teach an old dog new tricks, to put it simply. The way that your brain works is it's largely an electrochemical system. So you have these neurons that connect in a series that create a synapse, and that there's an electrical chemical reaction that fires down through that. Every time you fire a synapse, your brain, in a sense, goes, okay, this must be important if you keep reusing it. So we're going to make it easier for you to access this pathway because it seems like it's important. Now, this is how when you watch a baby walk, they kind of toddle around and they're really off in their gait, right? But then, as adults, we all know that that would look really silly if you walk down the hall and you look like a toddler, because our brain understands how to do it. It makes it more efficient. And that's the same with a lot of other tasks as well. That's called myelinization, where it creates this tissue lining around the cells. And it's not exactly this, but you can think of it like you have a synapse, which is like a dial-up modem connection. And if you keep accessing it, it becomes a fiber line with a really thick insulation around it. That's a little bit of a crude approximation, but it generally gets the point across.
It helps.
Right.
I like it.
The issue, though, is that your brain does not distinguish between things you want to reinforce and things you don't. So if you have a lot of negative, depressive thoughts or anxious thought, your brain says, hey, you keep hitting the synapse A, so we're going to make it really easy to fire synapse A. When in reality, if you could stop that, you would love to. So what neurofeedback or a lot of these other practices do is they help reinforce synapses and networks that are hopefully more beneficial for your quality of life. So in a lot of therapies, we talk about automatic thoughts in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically like an intrusive automatic thought that you don't really want to deal with, or an image of some kind. And that if you can challenge that thought, or if you can just kind of accept it and let it pass on so that it doesn't linger very long, you don't get stuck and ruminative on it, then you're strengthening, hopefully, those synapses that let things go, or that
Yeah.
challenge a thought that's not really true, but it feels true in the moment. And by strengthening those processes, you're building more resiliency. You're hopefully building more security, more self esteem, all the things that you would much rather have than
For
those
sure.
insecurities.
Is there any trick to, I don't know if trick's the right word, tricking your brain, but is there any practice or trick that you can do? Someone like me, a negative thought comes in, oh, I'm terrible at this or whatever. Is there something I can do if I think about it in the moment? Is there something I can do to help that and change it?
Yeah. So, well, you told me I only had an hour, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I might have to schedule an appointment afterwards. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, right. So there's a booking link at the bottom here to
Yeah,
go to your question. No, in all seriousness, absolutely. There's lots of tips and tricks and biohacking, and it depends on how you want to approach it, and it depends what the root of it is. So I'm a little hesitant to just like give an example of it. I can give
yeah,
a quick example that I think your listeners might appreciate using, but let me first give all the disclaimers. So by using any kind of technique that I'm recommending, you should, check with a therapist if you're working with somebody. Also, if you've had any specific trauma in the past, you want to be really careful about using any technique without being properly vetted by
gotcha.
a psychologist or someone who's well qualified. The issue is that if you try to relax your nervous system too quickly when you've had trauma in the past, it's going to leave you feeling, in many cases, very vulnerable, very raw and open, and then it could make your anxiety worse. So that's the overall caveat. I'll give you two answers to your question. So because I love neurofeedback, my dissertation was in neurofeedback. It's the first love of my professional life, if you will. Neurofeedback is basically physical therapy for your brain. So if there's a certain area of your brain that's not functioning well, let's say that your frontal lobe has some slow waves and it tends towards rumination then. So you can put an electrode here and you can monitor your brain activity. And every time it speeds up, every time you're able to get it to speed up, you get some kind of feedback. And that's the physical therapy. You're stretching and strengthening your brain muscle, if you will. But if I tell you to decrease your frontal theta, you don't really know what that feels like or looks like. You have no reference point. So putting an electrode there to actually give you that feedback and show you when you're performing better is how you get that physical therapy and that change, if you will. So that's kind of a bottom up approach to your question about how you deal with the thoughts. But again, like I said, you could have anxious thoughts because of rumination. You could have prefrontal emotional dysregulation. You could have a relaxation issue on the parietal lobe where your brain isn't self-soothed. So knowing what the root of the issue is really important. I'm speaking very general though to answer your question.
Absolutely, and that's totally fine. And I appreciate the disclaimers too. And the purpose of this podcast isn't to for you to help me. And this isn't my session by any stretch. We're going to talk because I really want to dive into to couples and retreats, especially because that can be so unique. And I was looking at your website about that, and we'll get into this here in a minute. But the retreats are very it's not like a group. I was picturing like a bunch of couples. It's not that. It's more personal based. And I know therapy is such a personal thing. Why is it so important though that it involves others? Because sometimes you feel like, oh, it's just I got to just deal with this. I got to deal with this therapy. But I'm married. I've been married 26 years. Why is it so important to involve the relationship with things?
So once again, we only have an hour.
Yep. I know I'm asking these open-ended questions that could take
No,
forever.
it's
I know.
great. Let me just first say that if anyone was listening to the previous question, I said there are going to be two examples. I only gave one. The second part of your answer for anxiety and intrusive thoughts would be cognitive behavioral therapy and thought logs. You can get those offline. You can go to a therapist and talk about thought logging, automatic thought logs. It's a really good resource to go check out. To answer your recent question though, we don't exist in isolation. We exist within a system. And there's more and more research coming out about how treating the system is really important, even for individual issues. And let me give you an example. I do a lot of trauma therapy with individuals during a couples therapy retreat or a marriage retreat. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And there's a lot of benefits to that. One of the benefits is that by you and I doing a piece of work, a piece of trauma work, and your spouse gets to witness that, they get a much deeper understanding of what your triggers are. If you're in a conflict with your spouse and they roll their eyes or walk out of the room and then you just fly off the handle, they can take that very personal. But imagine we're doing the trauma work and you start telling a story about how you used to go to your parents when you skinned your knee, or your girlfriend broke up with you or boyfriend broke up with you, and your parents would say, deal with your own shit, and they left the room. So all of a sudden now your spouse goes, oh, this has nothing to do with me. This is your stuff. And now that I know it's not personal, I can come to your aid and help you. And it's really powerful having that shift in the dynamic. It's also important because the DSM, which is what we use for diagnosing disorders in our culture and really in the world. Well, that's not totally true. There are other models people use, but generally in the US, let's say, it's individual. There's no diagnosis for sexless marriage. There's no diagnosis for constant conflict or being triggered vicarious trauma through your partner's PTSD. It's all about, well, you have an anxiety disorder, you're depressed, you're anxious, you have insomnia. But if you're diagnosed with insomnia and you lay down in bed wondering if your partner's going to pick a fight, it's not really just your insomnia at that point. That's actually a relational issue. So getting to the root of the issue is one answer to your question. The other answer is and this is out where I'm going to speak it with a little bit of bias. I think a lot of empathy and intimacy is wasted in individual therapy. Because when I do trauma work, again, to use that example, individually with you in couples therapy, the next thing I do when we're done is I have you turn to your spouse and to take all of that energy that you've just built up. For me to offer you sympathy as a therapist feels good, but it's kind of a waste. Like, who cares if you bond with me for the most part, right? I would rather take that inertia we've just created and have you turn to your partner and feed it back into your marriage. And imagine leaving a session and your partner says, oh, so you were doing trauma work today. How did it go? Like, there's no way to recap that
100%.
experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's so hard to, even just regular stuff that happens throughout the day, sometimes it's hard to capture that and to be able to tell, hey, here's what happened today. But if they're there, if they're experiencing it with you, yeah, that's got to be a whole different feeling for sure.
Very different. And it's much more intimate.
So tell me about these retreats. Because, at first, when I first saw the message from you and I thought, okay, yeah, we'll talk about, couples retreats, marriage retreat. That's what comes to mind, that movie Couples Retreat, which is kind of ridiculous and goofy or whatever. It sounds like it's just a couple and you as a therapist, or how does this work? How many days is it typically? Where do you go? Kind of give me the lay of the land for this.
Sure. So I'm located in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. That's where my office is. And so couples will fly in or drive up depending on where they are. I usually work with couples around the US. I have worked with some international couples as well, but 90% of my clientele is within the US for the most part, and lives in the US. They might be from somewhere else, but they live in the US. And basically it's a 1-on-2, it's a private couples intensive for each couple. And there's a questionnaire that goes out ahead of time so I can understand your goals. There's an online course that couples take before they show up so they get some background skills, and we can just be much more efficient with our time then, with me helping them with the more advanced application. And most of the couples that I work with, 90% or more, are coming as a last ditch effort. They have tried other rounds of therapy. It hasn't worked. They have maybe never been in therapy. They just got served divorce papers. Like, they're saying, okay, this is our Hail Mary. We're just trying to figure out, what do we do from here? That's most of who I work with. And I like to tell people that no one's ever taught how to be married. Like, you could go into Home Depot and buy all the tools in the store. Doesn't mean you can build me a house. So marriage is a lot more complicated than just, well, I want to be happy. And when you have kids, that's that 7-year chance of divorce goes up. It's the kids are a little older. You've been disconnected from your partner for several years. It's a high time for an affair to happen as well because someone else starts giving you attention. And it's a very fraught time for a lot of couples. And so I really love the work that I get to do with these relationships and these people because they've never been given a chance at success. They've never been given the tools to actually be married. And if you're just learning from your parents, well, about 50% of divorces, 50% of marriages end in divorce. And so the success rate of our predecessor generation is not great, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, so they come to town, and then so they just, is it like 2 or 3 days of just meeting with you solid? Is that kind of what it is? I mean, is there any other activities you do? How does this work? How does adventure play into it too, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I would say that just coming to a retreat is a bit of an adventure. Most people
For
have never
sure.
done anything like this. It's very dedicated, focused time on the marriage. And I work with married and non-married couples. What I tell people before they show up though, and this is on the website I believe as well, is that your marriage is my client. So when you show up, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to fight for the marriage. Best case scenario, we save it, and I have a pretty good success rate at that. Worst case scenario though, we're trying to improve your relationship and give you some future skills. Because especially if you have kids, the kids deserve to have two parents that get along and can move past their old shit and move and just
So
co-parent each other and move on.
so if I'm understanding this, so even if it get, like you said, last ditch effort, so they're coming there, it's usually their last ditch effort. So even if it's not gonna, the marriage isn't gonna be saved, and you can see that, and you're still like, hey, you guys still need to get along, especially if you have kids, yeah, because they're gonna be in each other's lives forever when you have kids, regardless of what
Exactly.
what happens. So you still, that's something still to fight for then as well, is having those skills, regardless if the marriage actually works out or not.
Yeah. And about 40% of couples report they regret getting divorced. And so part of my job is to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Most people come to me thinking they're not compatible with their spouse, but
Hmm.
really what their issue is a lack of skill. And you can learn skill. So learning the skills to be married could save your marriage. Now, the other part of that is that second and third marriages fail at a higher rate than first marriages. And so, again, the last final hope that I'm trying to offer is if this marriage really can't last, then let me fix your relationship, but also set you up for future success so that you don't end up back here in 7 years or whatever it might be. And to answer your question about the logistics, so
Yeah.
2 to 4 day program. 2 days is typically marriage enhancement if there are no issues. So I don't get a lot of premarital couples that are just trying to, learn the skills before they're in crisis. It happens occasionally. But like I said, people usually show up in crisis. A 3 day program is the most common for couples in crisis. And that includes discernment counseling too, trying to figure out if they're going to stay together or not. And the 4 day program is usually targeted towards couples where I need to do trauma work because having an extra day to weave in some of the trauma work and help with self-regulation skills so then that they can use the communication skills, it's helpful to have that extra day to weave it in together. And this is also on the website, but I'll just say my approach with couples is to consider 4 pillars of a healthy marriage. It's about communication, it's about regulation, how you deal with strong emotion around each other, prioritization, how you show that your spouse and your marriage are important to you, and intimacy, emotional, physical, sexual. And for some couples, spiritual intimacy plays a significant role as well.
Okay, so you're focusing on those 4 pillars. You're not there 24/7. The evenings, what are they? I mean, how does this? Yeah, like do you give them homework? Like, how does this? Like, if you're there all day working with them, do you have moments where, okay, it's just you two now? Here's your homework. What are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal is for them to be able to save their marriage without me at some point. Like they're going to leave and go home, right?
Right.
I've also found that doing this work is very intensive for people. So the optimal learning curve seems to be about 3 hours. So each day is 3 hours of intensive therapy. And then they get homework, they get some exercises to work on in between the sessions, come back the next morning, and we continue working. But imagine that you have a 3 hour conversation with somebody where there's no blaming, there's no judgment, you're owning your shit, and you're actually working towards resolution. It's exhausting for most people because they're so used to just arguing that when I actually stop them and redirect the conversation and get to the root of these issues, it's really, really different. So, for example, let's get back to adventure a moment. So, I had a couple that called me because they were going to go on a picnic. They were going to go spend the day together, have this wonderful, they're going to go travel to a beach, and they were, getting ready for their picnic, making the plans, and they never ended up going to their picnic. They ended up in couples therapy instead. And here's why. As they were preparing all the food, one of the spouses started to feel controlled by their partner. That, oh, you want this much meat in the sandwiches and the fruit is cut this way. And it was like they were feeling controlled. And then they lash out. So, if you're feeling threatened, your nervous system has a response: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fib, tender, befriend. And so that response kicks in. And now you're attacking your partner as if they're a threat to your life. And so what happens? Well, your partner responds with their own threat detection of the same variety. And your fight or flight, I'm going to say fight or flight for simplicity, your fight or flight response is designed to deal with a wild animal who's about to kill you or some other threat. So imagine two people that are about to go on a picnic as lovers and partners now look at each other like a snarling lion in the Serengeti. It's not going to be a really good time at that point. And so it escalates through the day. They keep slinging crap at each other. They never go to their picnic. They go to bed pissed at each other. And the next day they go, how the heck did we end up here? And so that tends to be the couples that I work with. And what happens is they come into the session and, there's an intake process and all the, typical stuff, although the intake is a lot faster than what I hear a lot of other therapists do. Some therapists apparently spend like 3 or 4 hours on intake. I think that's way overkill. So, they come in and they start saying, well, the reason I was mad is that you were telling me how to cut the fruit. And I go, whoa, wait a minute. That blames your partner. You got to own your own stuff. And then after a back and forth with me, we figure out that what I was really angry about is that when you were telling me how to cut the fruit, it reminded me of my dad telling me how to study, how to dress, how to talk to my friends, how to talk to my grandma, what presents to buy for a birthday party. And it sent me back to being 6 years old and having no control of my life. And one of the reasons I fell in love with you is that I wanted to go on adventures together. I wanted to plan a life together. I wanted to be peers and equals. And we lost that in that moment. And that's a very different conversation than, let me pack the goddamn fruit myself.
Right. Wow. Okay. Amazing. Obviously, you've got skills. You've been trained to handle all this, because it's overwhelming to me as someone listening. What goes in on this. It's very overwhelming. Staying on that topic of adventure, what is your thoughts on couples doing adventurous things together?
So initially, when I came across your podcast and I was thinking, oh, I got to talk to this guy, so I got to pitch something now, right? I was thinking, well, it seems to me that part of what brings couples together is adventure, and part of what breaks relationship is the lack of adventure. And if you think about your relationship, and I'd be curious, Jake, for you to, introspect on this yourself. There's probably a lot of adventure early in your relationship. You go to restaurants you've never been to. You probably travel if you, are able to do that, if you both like to do that. There's also spontaneous adventure where you just walk around and go through a city and like figure out what you're going to do. My wife and I joke about waking up at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Like, should we go for a bike ride? Should we go to a brunch? Like, now we don't have that luxury, but, it's a fun fantasy to kind of remember. And actually, that's my point, that later, as you have kids, as you have careers, as there's other things that, life throws your way, maybe you're taking care of your elderly parents, that ability for adventure gets significantly stifled. You don't have the chance to just wander around a city, say, okay, we have a dinner reservation at the Olive Garden at 6:00.
Yeah.
And so the sense of adventure really starts to fade. And oftentimes that's what connects people. And, what I often tell couples is there's no reason for us to reinvent the wheel. You have a formula that brought you together. Let's go back and see if we can recreate it. And it might not be identical, but you might have to make a dinner reservation at a restaurant. Okay. But Jake, could you make the reservation and not tell your wife and just pick something? Right now, she gets a sense of adventure. And the next week, when you have another date, she gets to do the same thing, assuming that you like surprises, of course. But how do we build that back in? Because that's often what couples, they're not using the word adventure, but when
Yeah.
they're coming in, their sense of fun and playful and excitement has been lost for years often.
It's just interesting you say that. And here I am sitting here and I am thinking about this in my own relationship. And my wife is great. 26 years we've been together. But I think about it sometimes you look back and you're like, wait, how did we get here? Like, why aren't we doing those fun little, even little things? You mentioned just, hey, maybe I should make a reservation and not say anything about it and just, why can't I do that now? I could do that now. And I haven't done that in a minute. And I could get that sense of adventure by doing that. I mean, it's just,
You could. And people get tired, people get complacent, we take our spouses for granted. There's a whole lot of reasons why it happens, and all of those reasons are very valid. They're real, right? But if you're thinking like, how come my sex life isn't as spicy as it used to be? Well, there's probably a reason for that.
yeah, absolutely. So without giving away any identities, obviously, but do you have an example of maybe another couple or something that came in and kind of where they were at and kind of where they were when the retreat was over?
Sure. I mean, I have lots
I
of
know.
examples.
Yeah.
I see 30 to 50 couples a year typically for these retreats.
Wow.
So is there a flavor you're looking for in particular, or just whatever comes to mind?
Yeah, yeah. Whatever comes to mind. I mean, just a memorable one where you're like, I mean, you probably see this all the time though, where someone you're like, I don't know how I'm going to help this couple, but then by the time the 3 or 4 days are up, it's like they seem happy together. They're affectionate with each other. They're, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've learned to not predict the outcomes. I think when I started doing this work about 10 years ago, it was really tempting for me to be like, okay, this couple's not going to last, or like, oh, I really think I can help this one, or whatever it might be. What I've learned is you just don't know. There are so many factors, so many variables that go into the process, and I've seen couples that are screaming at each other, and I'm constantly interrupting and redirecting them. And then I walk in on the last day and they're making out in my waiting room.
Wow.
So you really never know. I think something that really strikes me is, again, coming back to that trauma piece. There have been so many moments where, I'm working with a client, and, I'm pretty well differentiated at this point. I can help couples. I can apply the skills and techniques that I know. I can, help them process the sessions. And I'm not generally a very sappy kind of person. But there was a couple that I had a few months ago where his childhood, holy shit. I mean, he was a POW in his home, like full on war stories that he would tell me of physical abuse, sexual abuse, just like, oh my God. And when we brought him into the trauma work, with his permission, of course, one of the techniques that I use is called psychodrama, where you put the empty chair and you let people bring in, people from their lives. And of course, he brought his mom, he brought his dad, he brought his siblings, he brought the priests, he brought all these people that, he needed to confront and talk to. And then he brought God. And watching someone confront God was like unbelievable. And his wife then seeing him go through that and be so broken, because he was such a stoic person. And part of what she said when we were done is that she realized that he's holding so much in, and that it comes out towards her, which is not fair. It's not appropriate, but she kind of got it. And I remember at the end, I left the room and I said, here, you guys take the room, tell me when you're done. And I'm sure they were, hugging, and that was a really big session. And like I said, I don't consider myself a sappy person, but wow, I felt for him. That was tough.
And I don't understand how you as a therapist do that and you deal with people who are struggling to still be human sometimes. It feels like, how do you still be human? Because I mean, I can see the compassion in your face right now, the tears, How do you do that day in, day out? You personally?
Well, I think if you're going to do retreat work, you have to have self-care. There was a moment where I had to look myself in the mirror multiple times over the years and say, am I the best version of myself to do this work? sometimes it was, okay, I need to get a little more training in this professionally. And sometimes it was like, I just need to take care of my own self. Several months ago, I actually signed up with a personal trainer. So at the end of every week now, I just go and I tell her, kick my ass this week. Every time she says, how are you doing? I'm like, you need to kick my ass this week. Just, give me the weights, give me the reps. Cause I need to sweat it. I need to sweat and just get it out. And so that's been helpful for me. I used to do yoga. I've kind of gone more from yoga to resistance training, and that's a whole story, but that's really helped. And then, my wife is a co-owner of the business. She doesn't work with couples. She does the other side. She does play therapy with kids, and she
Wow.
does work with adults too, but her passion is really play therapy with kids. And so, going home and just being able to hang out with her, and most days my kids, I mean, kids can drive you crazy too, but just going home to that support is a huge piece of it. And
Love
she
it.
and I are a great team. We work very well. And I mean, we've had our issues, everyone does, but we're a really good team.
So even a couples therapist can have an issue in his own marriage? Is that what you're saying?
Imagine that.
Amazing. Speaking of you and your wife, what adventurous things do you two like to do together?
We just got back from watching Hamilton on Broadway in Boston, and she's a city girl. She loves the city, so I think I stole her to the country, and I have to remember that. Okay, she needs like her dose of the city every now and then. Sometimes, with me, if I can go, and sometimes just like, hey honey, I know you need to go see a friend or do your thing, and we try to make that happen too. But using the time that we have where we can get a sitter and go do something fun. She likes to travel, I like to travel with her. I probably wouldn't travel as much if it were just me, but I like going with her. And then some of the things that I like to do, so we'll go to a concert, go to the bar downtown and just listen to music even if we don't know the band. I like to go on hikes and just talk. So we'll just spend time together and talk and go on a hike. Or we have a nice little estate set up on our property too, and with several acres. And so just walking around and even doing yard work together to me sometimes feels like an adventure, figuring out, okay, where are we going to put the plants for the next growing season and all that kind of stuff. So I think sometimes adventure feels like a very grand term,
For sure.
but I can have an adventure just hanging out in the yard too. And then, we haven't talked about sex as an adventure too. To respect her privacy, I won't share personal stories. But I think, having an active sex life and finding a way to make that playful and adventurous, and, you don't have to build a leather room in your house, but like keeping it kind of fun and exciting and fresh is a big part of what I help couples with as well.
And I would imagine, especially if you have couples who are kind of coming at their wits' end, you've probably ran into a lot of sexless marriages that come in there and, you know, need that, want that, but don't know how to approach it.
Absolutely. What surprises me more is couples that say our sex life is great and I'm ready to divorce that person.
Interesting.
And there's a real interesting disconnect sometimes that their chemistry really is there. They just don't have the skills for the other parts of their relationship.
Interesting. Wow. I didn't even think of that part of it. It just doesn't, because you always hear the sexless marriages, they're poor, these poor people, who don't have that. But I never thought about the ones who are maybe still having great sex, but
Yeah,
the
I mean,
rest
I
of
would
it.
say sexless marriage is more common, but
Hmm.
it's not an insignificant amount that still have an active sex life and still are on the edge of divorce.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. So you've been in this, how long have you had this? You've been doing a couples therapist for how long, roughly?
So a little less than 10 years in the
Less
field.
than 10.
I started in neurofeedback and brain mapping. A couple years into practice, I started working more with couples. I did some couples work before too. I did yoga retreats for couples back
Okay,
when I
cool.
had that business. But then at the start of the pandemic, when I couldn't bring people to the office anymore to do the neurofeedback work, I started just going back to psychotherapy, and I got a bunch of couples reaching out, or people that I would work with say, they would tell me their story and I go, you need couples work. I don't think we need to do individually. I think you need couples work. And then that just exploded. I had done, several retreats before that point, but then, 5 years ago, that just became the majority of the practice.
For you in this business, Maybe it's in this business, but or for you personally, what's the toughest part? What's the biggest challenges that you face?
People are really mean to their spouse sometimes. And I think I have a certification in working with neurodiverse couples. And I specifically went to go get that training because I needed to have empathy for the people that weren't having empathy. Because, to watch, like, sometimes someone would go through the trauma work, for example, and then I would turn to their spouse and say, okay, I want to bring you into the conversation, share what's going on for you. And most people would say, oh my God, that was so powerful, or I feel closer to them, or like there was a real genuine connection. And every now and then someone would say, well, I already knew all that. And I was like, what? Like, did you miss the point of this?
Yeah.
But realizing that that's their frame of reference, and that what might be happening, and this is one possibility, is that maybe they were so uncomfortable they were cutting off their own emotion, right? Because to see someone that you care about go through a traumatic retelling of the story and confronting people in their life and sobbing, which not everyone does, but a lot of people do, then that's really hard. I mean, I wouldn't want to, like, I would be uncomfortable watching my wife go through something like that. And we have a very good relationship. So understanding lack of empathy as really just another piece of information and not judging the person for it, I think that took a little bit of time and patience on my side. And that's one of those things that, every therapist is supposed to be non-judgmental. Well, we're all humans. We see
Yeah.
someone, call their wife names or their husband names, and, like, it's not a nice thing to do. And, luckily I can jump in and stop it. But understanding what's at the root of that took, that only kind of clicked a few years ago.
Interesting. Okay. I like that. Thank you for sharing that. And now that you've been doing this for, pushing a decade, what does the future hold for you? Where do you want this to go? Or do you have any other plans? What are the plans for Dr. H?
I have lots of plans. So we're about to publish an article this year. I'm wrapping up the rough draft. I have most of the data collected now. Just working on all the nitty gritty references and citations, and I have to do the discussion section as well. And I'm really excited so I have about a sample size of 30 couples that I've seen in the study, and 88% of them that were on the edge of divorce, which was all but, I think, one couple. No, sorry. 27 of them were on the edge of divorce. 88% after a 3 or 4 day retreat reported feeling hopeful enough and reconnected with their spouse that they wanted to continue their marriage and keep working at it. And so I'm really excited about that,
Awesome.
to be able to show those results and let people know that there is hope. Like, you can work on your marriage. The hope is to then build off of that, do a book, do trainings. I really want to grow this practice and show other therapists and I mean, I can only see so many couples, right?
Hmm.
So getting other people into this that are well trained, that have their head in the right place to do this work, that's my ultimate dream. And there's no reason that it can't be international. Having a therapist who's trained in this model and understands Japanese culture, for example, is probably going to do a better job than I would with those couples. So being able to broaden this out and really reach anyone who needs the service would be my dream.
Love that. And then just kind of looking for anybody, maybe there's a couple out there who's struggling, or maybe there's even a therapist who's like, I'm interested in what Dr. H is doing. How can people get a hold of you? How can they reach out to you if they want to get involved?
Yeah, so marriagequest.org is the website. I'm happy to provide a free consultation with anyone who's thinking about the service. We also have a blog that there's a lot of free information if you just want to read about the process and get some quick tips and things like that. Check out the blog. There's no obligation. You can just read our info and go from there, and we're here when you need us then. For therapists that are interested in being trained, I'm not quite at that point yet. We got a few steps there. But what I have been doing is consulting with therapists. So they'll send me a couple for the intensive triage work. And then if they're going to continue working with that therapist after the retreat, I'll coordinate the care and,
Gotcha.
talk shop behind the scenes so that they're getting the best of the process as a continuation. And I do want people to know that if they're reaching out and thinking of a couples retreat, this is an investment. in your relationship. This is not a $20 copay like you do with insurance. So, be prepared to understand that. And if you're willing to put in the investment and learn how to save your marriage or how to set your kids up and your future for success, then it's probably a good fit. I will also say that there are some contraindications. If you're in a domestic violence situation, you really need to go get safe first. That's a priority. Also, please don't drag your partner to a retreat, because you're not going to get what you need out of it then. There needs to be two consenting, grounded adults in order to engage in the process. And at least if you're motivated to figure out what you don't know and do your best, you're probably going to get a lot out.
Great advice, great words. This was a lot of fun for me. I appreciate you taking the time. My final question to you, it's a question I like to ask everybody. For you, Dr. H, what does adventure mean to you?
I think adventure is about getting in touch with a wild part of yourself. And if you can find someone to share an adventure, there's a synergy that happens where you can go co-wild, let's say.
I love it. This was fun. It was great to get to know you. This helped me think a lot. Now I've got things in my own mind going through. I'm like, how can I improve my relationship with my wife? And I love it. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
I appreciate it, Jake. And maybe I'll come back and we can have a whole episode on adventure in the bedroom if you want to go that direction.
There we go. I love it. A huge thank you to Dr. David Helfand for joining me on Journey with Jake and sharing his wisdom on the adventure of relationships. I really appreciate the practical tools and heartfelt stories he shared, reminding us that connection, communication, and a bit of intentional adventure can make all the difference. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Helfand and his retreats, visit marriagequest.org. Thank you, Dr. H, for a fascinating conversation. And to all of you listening, thank you for being here each week and for making Journey with Jake such a meaningful part of my own adventure. I'm so grateful for your support and the chance to share these powerful stories. Be sure to follow the show and leave a quick review on Apple or Spotify. It really helps others find these conversations. Next time, I'll be joined by Steve Seidel, TEDx speaker and founder of the Seidel Agency, who's helping men redefine connection and purpose through Jent's journey. It's a powerful and heartfelt conversation you won't want to miss. Until then, just remember, it's not always about the destination, as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.